Imagine, right now, a wave of warmth beginning at the center of your chest. Feel it pulse outward, gently, like a tide that knows exactly where to go. It moves through your shoulders, down through your arms, into the very tips of your fingers. It flows upward into your throat, your jaw, softening everything it touches. And now, it reaches deeper, past muscle, past bone, into the quiet inner world of your cells. Every single one of them, receiving this signal. This isn't just a feeling. This is a biological command. Your body is speaking its oldest language, and tonight, you are going to learn how to listen. There is a molecule moving through you right now that most people misunderstand. They call oxytocin the love hormone, the bonding chemical, and yes, it is all of those things. But it is something far more profound. Oxytocin is a resonance. It is the frequency your nervous system has been waiting to receive since the moment you were born. When this molecule floods your bloodstream, it carries a single, ancient message to every tissue, every organ, every fiber of your being. The message is this: you are safe. The world is kind. You can stop fighting now. It is time to rest. This frequency is not new. It has been humming beneath the surface of every embrace that ever healed you. Every moment a mother's hand steadied a frightened child. Every time a stranger's kindness made you believe again. It is the invisible thread that has held humanity together through ice ages and wars and long, dark nights when survival seemed impossible. Trust is not a concept. It is a cellular event. And your body has been performing this miracle since before you had words to describe it. So, tonight, we are not simply going to talk about healing. That would be too small. Tonight, we are going to trigger something. We are going to awaken the cellular symphony of trust that lives inside you, the same symphony that has kept our species alive for millennia. Not through force, not through effort, but through surrender to the rhythm your body already knows by heart. So let your shoulders fall. Let your breath slow to the pace of something ancient and unhurried. Release whatever armor you carried into this moment, because you do not need it here. You are entering a sanctuary now, and it is not a place outside of you. It is the cathedral of your own biology, the resonance that has always been humming just beneath your awareness, waiting for you to come home. You are home now, and every cell in your body knows it. Deep within the center of your brain, hidden behind layers of thought and memory and everything you have ever known, there is a small, ancient structure, no larger than an almond. It is called the hypothalamus, and it has been keeping you alive since before you took your first breath. This tiny region of tissue is the silent conductor of your entire inner world. It regulates your temperature, your hunger, your thirst, your sleep. It is the keeper of rhythms you never think about, the guardian of processes so essential that your conscious mind was never trusted with the task. And nestled within this extraordinary structure, among clusters of neurons that have been firing since you were curled inside your mother's womb, there is a factory, a quiet, tireless, ancient factory that produces one of the most powerful molecules your body will ever know. That molecule is oxytocin. Now, you have probably heard this word before. Perhaps someone told you it was the love hormone, the chemical released when a mother holds her newborn child, when two lovers embrace, when a friend places their hand on your shoulder at exactly the moment you need it most. And all of that is true. But it is only the surface of something much deeper, much older, much more extraordinary than a single word like love could ever contain. Because oxytocin is not just a feeling, it is a biological command. It is a signal so powerful, so fundamental to your survival, that your body built an entire delivery system just to carry it from the place where it is born to the places where it is needed most. Let me take you on that journey. Let me show you what happens inside you when this molecule is released, because it is one of the most beautiful processes in all of human biology. It begins in those clusters of neurons within the hypothalamus, in regions called the paraventricular nucleus and the supraoptic nucleus. These are names you do not need to remember, but I want you to know them because they deserve to be spoken aloud. They are the birthplace of trust. Within these clusters, specialized cells called magnocellular neurons begin to produce oxytocin in response to signals from your senses, your emotions, your memories, even your breath. The molecule is assembled piece by piece, a chain of 9 amino acids folded into a shape so precise that it fits into its receptor the way a key fits into a lock that was made for it and nothing else. Once produced, this molecule travels down long neural pathways to a small gland that hangs just beneath the hypothalamus, like a jewel suspended from the base of the brain. This is the posterior pituitary gland, and it serves as the gateway between your nervous system and your bloodstream. Think of it as a door between the world of thought and the world of flesh. When the signal comes, when the moment is right, the posterior pituitary opens that door and releases oxytocin directly into your blood. And in that instant, everything begins to change. Imagine a single drop of golden light falling into a still, dark river. Watch it spread. Watch it move outward in every direction, carried by the current to places it has never been, and yet somehow already knows. This is what oxytocin does when it enters your bloodstream. It does not rush. It does not force. It flows. It travels through your veins and arteries with a patience that matches the rhythm of your own heartbeat. And as it moves, it searches. It is looking for its receptors, those locks that only this key can open, and they are everywhere. They are in your heart. They are in your gut. They are in your brain. They are woven into tissues you have never thought about, and organs you have never thanked, waiting, always waiting for this exact molecule to arrive and deliver its message. And what is that message? It is the simplest and most profound message your biology can send. The message is this: you are safe. You can stop running now. You can stop fighting now. The danger has passed. Or perhaps there was never any danger at all. And it is time, finally, to rest. You see, your body lives in a constant conversation between two opposing states. On one side, there is the sympathetic nervous system, the ancient alarm that floods you with adrenaline and cortisol when it perceives a threat. This is your fight or flight response, and it is brilliant at what it does. It sharpens your vision, accelerates your heart, tenses your muscles, diverts blood away from your digestive system and toward your limbs so that you can run, so that you can strike, so that you can survive. It saved your ancestors from predators on the savannah. It saves you when you leap out of the path of an oncoming car. It is fierce and fast and utterly necessary, but it was never designed to be permanent. It was designed to spike and then retreat, to surge and then dissolve, like a wave that crashes against the shore and then pulls back into the ocean. The problem is that in the modern world, for so many of us, that wave never pulls back. The cortisol keeps flowing, the adrenaline keeps simmering, the alarm keeps sounding, not because there is a predator at the door, but because there is an email, a deadline, a memory, a fear, a loneliness that sits in the chest like a stone that will not move. And over time, this sustained state of alert begins to wear the body down. Blood pressure rises and stays risen. The gut tightens and forgets how to release. The immune system, exhausted from standing guard against a threat that never arrives, begins to falter. The heart, asked to beat faster and harder for months and years on end, begins to suffer. This is where oxytocin becomes not just beautiful, but essential. Because oxytocin is the override. It is the signal that tells your sympathetic nervous system to stand down. When oxytocin binds to its receptors in the cardiovascular system, something remarkable happens. The smooth muscles in the walls of your blood vessels begin to relax. They soften, they widen. Blood pressure drops. Not because you willed it, not because you thought calm thoughts, but because a molecule arrived at a receptor and delivered a chemical instruction that your body could not ignore. In the presence of oxytocin, cortisol levels fall. The adrenal glands, those small organs perched atop your kidneys that have been pumping stress hormones into your system, receive the signal to ease their production. The storm quiets, the dust begins to settle, and it is like rain. Imagine the gentlest rain you have ever known, falling on a landscape that has been dry and cracked and desperate for relief. Not a downpour, not a flood, but a soft, steady, unhurried rain that touches every surface with equal tenderness. This is what oxytocin does to a body that has been living in stress. It does not force the tension out. It dissolves it. It does not demand peace. It invites it. And your body, which has been waiting for this invitation longer than you know, accepts. In the gut, where hundreds of millions of neurons form what scientists now call the second brain, oxytocin receptors receive this molecule and begin to shift the entire landscape of digestion and immunity. The gut relaxes. Inflammation, which thrives in the presence of cortisol, begins to subside. The microbiome, that vast community of organisms that lives within you and influences everything from your mood to your immune response, begins to rebalance in an environment that finally feels safe enough for restoration. You may have noticed this yourself without knowing what was happening. That feeling after a long embrace, when something deep in your belly seems to unclench, when a tightness you had been carrying so long you forgot it was there suddenly releases. That is oxytocin reaching your gut. That is the molecule of connection telling your second brain that the world, in this moment, is kind. And in the brain itself, the effects are profound. Oxytocin crosses into regions associated with fear and threat detection, most notably the amygdala, that almond-shaped cluster that serves as your brain's danger alarm. In the presence of oxytocin, the amygdala's reactivity decreases. It does not shut off. It does not go blind to genuine threats. It simply recalibrates. It becomes less likely to interpret neutral faces as hostile, less likely to read ambiguity as danger, less likely to keep you locked in a cycle of suspicion and vigilance that serves no one, least of all you. At the same time, oxytocin enhances activity in the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for empathy, social reasoning, and the capacity to see another human being not as a potential threat, but as a potential ally. This is the chemistry of belonging. This is the biological architecture of trust. But here is what I find most extraordinary. The part that still fills me with wonder no matter how many times I consider it. Oxytocin does not require another person to be released. Yes, it flows powerfully during physical touch, during eye contact, during the warmth of genuine human connection. But your body can also produce it in solitude. It can be stimulated by your own breath. Slow, deep, intentional breathing activates the vagus nerve, that long wandering nerve that runs from your brainstem down through your chest and into your abdomen. And vagal activation is one of the most reliable triggers for oxytocin release. When you breathe slowly, when you breathe deeply, when you place your hand over your own heart and offer yourself the same compassion you would offer a frightened child, you are not performing an empty ritual. You are sending a signal through the oldest pathways in your nervous system, a signal that arrives at the hypothalamus and says, yes, produce the molecule, open the door, let the golden light flow. This is why self-compassion is not a luxury. It is not soft. It is not indulgent. It is a biological act of survival. When you speak gently to yourself, when you refuse to punish your own body with harsh words and relentless criticism, you are creating the internal conditions for oxytocin release. You are becoming your own source of safety. You are proving to your nervous system that even when no one else is present, even when the room is quiet and the night is long, there is someone here who will not abandon you. And that someone is you. This is the invisible thread I want you to understand. Oxytocin is the reason you can sit beside another person in complete silence and feel held. It is the reason a wordless glance across a room can make you feel less alone. It is the chemical foundation of that experience we call presence, the sense that someone is with you, truly with you. Not just occupying the same space, but inhabiting the same emotional reality. And it is also the reason you can close your eyes, place both hands on your chest, breathe slowly, and feel a warmth begin to build that has no external source. That warmth is not imagined. It is not metaphor. It is oxytocin binding to receptors in your cardiac tissue, telling your heart that it is held, that it is safe, that it can beat at a pace meant for living rather than surviving. Your body is a vessel of trust. It was designed this way. Every receptor, every neural pathway, every gland and cell involved in this process exists because, over millions of years, the organisms that could signal safety to themselves and to each other were the ones that survived. Trust is not a weakness. It is the most sophisticated survival strategy biology has ever produced. And the system that delivers it, the system built around this remarkable 9 amino acid molecule, is always ready. It is always waiting. It does not care how long it has been since you last felt safe. It does not care how many times the alarm has sounded. The factory in the hypothalamus does not shut down. The receptors in your heart and gut and brain do not disappear. They are there, right now, as you listen to these words, waiting for the signal to begin. And when that signal comes, when the oxytocin begins to flow and the cortisol begins to fall, and the blood vessels soften and the gut unclenches and the amygdala turns down its volume, something happens that goes beyond what any single organ or system can explain. There is a shift that moves through the entire body at once, as if every cell received the same message at the same moment. The noise of stress, that constant hum of tension and vigilance that has become so familiar you mistake it for silence, begins to fade. And in its place, there is something you may not have felt in a very long time. It is not excitement. It is not joy. It is something quieter than both of those, something deeper. It is the profound biological stillness of a body that finally believes it is safe. And in that stillness, in that silence where the noise used to be, the real work of healing begins. There is an alarm inside you that has been ringing for a very long time. You may not hear it anymore. You may have grown so accustomed to its sound that it has become part of the background of your life, like the hum of a refrigerator in a quiet kitchen or the distant rumble of traffic through a closed window. You stop noticing it because it never stopped, but your body hears it. Every cell in your body hears it, and every cell in your body has been responding to it, faithfully, obediently, without rest, for longer than you know. Tonight, we are going to find that alarm, and we are going to watch it go quiet. Deep in the temporal lobes of your brain, tucked beneath the folds of the cerebral cortex, there are two small structures shaped like almonds. Together, they are called the amygdala, and they are among the oldest parts of your brain. They were there before language. They were there before abstract thought, before music, before art, before every beautiful and complex thing your higher brain would eventually learn to create. The amygdala existed first because its job was the most important job any brain could have. Its job was to keep you alive. The amygdala is your threat detection system. It scans the world around you with a speed and sensitivity that your conscious mind cannot match. It processes sensory information before you are even aware you have received it. A shadow that moves too quickly in the corner of your vision, a tone of voice that carries an edge you cannot quite name, a smell that reminds you of a place where something bad once happened, even though you cannot remember what it was. The amygdala catches all of it. It evaluates all of it. And when it decides that something is dangerous, it does not wait for your permission to act. It sends a signal directly to the hypothalamus, which activates the sympathetic nervous system, which floods your body with cortisol and adrenaline. And within milliseconds, before you have even formed a conscious thought, your heart is beating faster, your muscles are tightening, your digestion is slowing, and your entire biology has shifted into a state of defense. This is the fight or flight response, and it is magnificent in its speed and precision. It has saved countless lives across millions of years. But the amygdala has a flaw. It cannot tell the difference between a real threat and a remembered one. It cannot distinguish between a predator in the grass and a cruel word replaying in your memory. It cannot separate a genuine danger from the anticipation of a danger that may never arrive. To the amygdala, fear is fear, threat is threat. And so it sounds the alarm not only when you are in danger, but when you feel as though you might be, when you remember a time you were, when you imagine a future in which you could be. For those who have lived with chronic stress, with trauma, with prolonged periods of uncertainty or emotional pain, the amygdala can become locked in a state of heightened vigilance. The alarm does not spike and retreat the way it was designed to. It stays on. It becomes the baseline, and the body, ever faithful to the signals it receives, remains in a state of perpetual defense. This is where oxytocin enters, not as a gentle suggestion, but as a molecular authority. When oxytocin reaches the amygdala, it binds to receptors on the neurons responsible for generating fear responses, and it does something that no amount of willpower or positive thinking can accomplish on its own. It reduces the firing rate of those neurons. It dampens their reactivity. It does not destroy them. It does not blind you to real danger. What it does is recalibrate the entire system, raising the threshold for what triggers the alarm so that neutral faces no longer look threatening, ambiguous situations no longer feel catastrophic, and the silence of an empty room no longer hums with unnamed dread. Oxytocin acts as a molecular brake, and when that brake engages, the amygdala's grip on your nervous system begins to loosen. Imagine you have been living in a house where the fire alarm has been sounding for years. At first, the noise was unbearable. You covered your ears. You searched every room for the fire. But over time, when no fire appeared and no one came to switch the alarm off, you simply learned to live with it. You raised your voice to be heard over it. You slept in fragments because the sound never fully allowed you to rest. Your shoulders stayed near your ears. Your jaw stayed clenched. You forgot what silence sounded like. And then, one day, someone walks in and reaches up and turns the alarm off. The silence that follows is not just the absence of sound. It is a presence. It fills the room. It fills your chest. It fills the space behind your eyes where tension has been living for so long. And in that silence, you realize how exhausted you are. You realize how much energy it took to function in all that noise. You realize that you have been surviving, not living, and that there is a difference between the two that you can now, finally, feel. This is what oxytocin does to the amygdala. It is the hand that reaches up and turns the alarm off. But the effects do not stop there, because the alarm in your brain is connected to every alarm in your body. And when the signal at the top changes, the signal everywhere changes. I want to take you deeper now, past the brain, past the nervous system, down into the smallest living units of your biology. I want to take you into your cells. Every cell in your body exists in one of two fundamental states. It is either in a state of defense or a state of growth. It cannot be in both at the same time. This is not a metaphor. This is cellular biology. When your nervous system is signaling danger, when cortisol and adrenaline are circulating at elevated levels, your cells receive that information and they respond. They shift into what researchers have called the cell danger response. In this state, the cell membrane, that thin, intelligent boundary that separates the inside of the cell from the outside world, changes its behavior. It becomes less permeable. It tightens. It reduces the flow of nutrients coming in and waste products going out. The cell is essentially locking its doors and pulling down its shutters because the chemical environment around it is saying that something out there is hostile, and the priority now is not to grow, not to repair, not to communicate openly with neighboring cells, but to hunker down and survive. Inside the cell, the effects are equally profound. The mitochondria, those remarkable structures that serve as the energy factories of every living cell in your body shift their production. Under normal conditions, mitochondria produce energy in the form of a molecule called ATP, and this energy is used for everything your body does to maintain and renew itself. Tissue repair, immune regulation, the building of new proteins, the clearing of damaged ones, the elegant, ongoing maintenance that keeps you not just alive, but healthy. But when the cell danger response is active, the mitochondria change their priorities. They begin diverting energy away from repair and regeneration and toward defensive functions. They increase the production of reactive oxygen species, molecules that serve as part of the cell's defense system, but that, in excess, cause oxidative stress and damage the very structures they are meant to protect. The cell's energy budget shifts from building and healing to guarding and fighting. And if this state persists, if the danger signal never clears, the cost becomes enormous. Tissues that should be repairing themselves do not. Inflammation that should be resolving lingers. The body ages faster, heals slower, and accumulates damage that it has the capacity to fix but never receives the permission to address. This is the critical point I need you to understand. Your cells do not speak your language. They do not understand the words you say to yourself late at night. They do not respond to affirmations or intentions, or the stories you tell about who you are and who you want to become. Your cells respond to chemistry. They respond to the molecules that wash over them through your bloodstream and your interstitial fluid, and they read those molecules the way you would read a letter written in your native tongue. Cortisol is a letter that says, defend yourself. Adrenaline is a letter that says, prepare to run. And oxytocin, when it arrives, is a letter that says the threat has passed. The world outside is safe. You can open your doors now. You can stand down. You can return to the work you were always meant to do. When oxytocin levels rise and cortisol levels fall, the cell danger response begins to deactivate. The cell membrane softens. It becomes more permeable again, allowing nutrients to flow in and waste to flow out with the efficiency your biology requires. The mitochondria, receiving this new chemical message, begin to shift their energy production back toward repair and regeneration. ATP output increases. Reactive oxygen species decrease. The internal environment of the cell transforms from a fortress under siege into a workshop humming with purposeful activity. Proteins are built. Damaged DNA is repaired. Inflammatory signals are dialed down. The cell, given permission to stop defending, remembers what it was designed to do, and it begins to do it with a quiet, steady devotion that asks nothing of your conscious mind. This is the transition from defense to growth, and it happens not in one cell, but in billions of them, simultaneously, like a vast city emerging from a blackout, lights flickering on in window after window after window, until the whole landscape is illuminated. There is a bioelectrical component to this shift that researchers are only beginning to fully map. The voltage across the cell membrane, known as the membrane potential, changes as the cell moves from a defensive to a restorative state. In defense mode, this voltage shifts in ways that reduce the cell's ability to communicate with its neighbors, to exchange signals, to participate in the cooperative work of tissue maintenance and immune coordination. As the danger signal clears and oxytocin's influence spreads, the membrane potential normalizes. Cells begin to talk to each other again. Gap junctions, those tiny channels that connect one cell to its neighbor, open more freely. The tissue becomes a community again rather than a collection of isolated bunkers, and in that renewed communication, in that restored connection between cell and cell, the body finds its capacity to heal. Think of a turbulent ocean, waves crashing against each other from every direction, white foam and churning water, and a surface so chaotic that nothing can be reflected in it. This is the internal state of a body locked in chronic stress. Now watch the wind die down. Watch the waves lose their fury, not all at once, but gradually, each one smaller than the last. Watch the surface of the water become still. Watch it become so flat, so calm, so perfectly quiet that it turns into a mirror, reflecting the sky above it with absolute clarity. This is what happens inside you when the safety signal reaches your cells. The static clears, the noise subsides, and what remains is not emptiness, it is clarity. It is the biological stillness in which your body can finally see what needs to be repaired, what needs to be built, what needs to be released. Your body is a sanctuary. It has always been a sanctuary, but for so long, that sanctuary has been occupied by noise, by the ceaseless chatter of a defense system that forgot how to stand down. What oxytocin does, at every level from the amygdala to the mitochondria, is reclaim that sanctuary. It moves through you, like someone walking through a vast, beautiful cathedral, gently closing every door that was left open to the storm, extinguishing every alarm that was left ringing in an empty room, drawing every curtain against the harsh light of a world that demanded too much for too long. And in the quiet that follows, in the warmth that spreads through tissue and blood and bone, each cell receives the same whispered permission. You are safe now. You can put down your weapons. You can begin again. This is the language of safety, and your body is fluent in it. It does not need to be taught. It does not need to be convinced. It only needs to receive the signal. And while this signal can be generated in solitude, through breath, through stillness, through the courageous act of offering yourself compassion in a world that often forgets to, there is something that amplifies it beyond what any single body can achieve alone. There is a resonance that occurs when this safety signal meets another, when one nervous system recognizes its own calm reflected in the presence of another, when the simple act of being touched or held or seen by someone who is themselves at peace becomes a biological event so powerful that it can reach places inside you that no medicine and no meditation has ever reached. And it is to that resonance, that extraordinary amplification of safety through connection, that we now turn. There is a language older than words that your body has been speaking and receiving since the very first moment you were held. It is not a language of sound or symbol. It is a language of pressure and warmth, of rhythm and intention, written not in ink, but in the slow, deliberate movement of one person's hand across another person's skin. You learned this language before you learned to see clearly, before you could distinguish your mother's face from the blur of light and shadow that surrounded you in those earliest hours of life. And yet you understood it perfectly. You understood it because your body was built to understand it. Because woven into the very fabric of your skin there are receptors that exist for no other purpose than to receive this single ancient message. The message of safe, gentle, loving touch beneath the surface of your skin, beneath the epidermis, and into the deeper layers where nerve endings branch and weave like the roots of an ancient forest. There is a class of nerve fiber that scientists did not fully appreciate until remarkably recently. They are called key tactile afferents, and they are unlike any other sensory nerve in your body. Most of the nerve fibers in your skin are designed for speed. They detect sharp pain, sudden temperature changes, the precise location of a pinprick, and they transmit that information to your brain with extraordinary rapidity, because in moments of danger, speed saves lives. But C tactile afferents are not interested in danger. They are not built for speed. They are built for something else entirely. These fibers respond specifically and almost exclusively to gentle, slow, rhythmic touch. The kind of touch that moves across the skin at a velocity of between 1 and 10 centimeters per second. This is not a coincidence. This is precisely the speed at which a hand moves when it is stroking a child's back to soothe them to sleep. It is the speed of a palm drawn slowly across a lover's shoulder. It is the speed of fingers moving through someone's hair with no purpose other than tenderness. Evolution did not leave this to chance. Over millions of years, your body developed an entire sensory system dedicated not to detecting threats, but to detecting care. These nerve fibers are most densely concentrated on the back, the forearms, the scalp, and the face, the very places where comforting touch most naturally falls. And when they are activated, they do not send their signals along the fast, sharp pathways used by pain and pressure. They send their signals along slow, unmyelinated fibers that travel to a region of the brain called the posterior insular cortex, a region involved in processing the emotional quality of sensation. And from there, the signal reaches the hypothalamus. And you already know what happens when the hypothalamus receives a signal of safety. The factory begins its work. Oxytocin is released, and the cascade of peace begins. What moves me most about this system is its specificity. C tactile afferents do not respond to all touch equally. A quick, rough, mechanical contact barely activates them. A clinical or impersonal touch registers only faintly. But when touch is slow, when it is warm, when it carries the unmistakable quality of intention and care, these nerve fibers fire with an intensity that sends a clear and unambiguous signal to the deepest parts of your brain. Your body does not merely detect that it is being touched, it detects how it is being touched. It detects why it is being touched, and it responds not to the physical pressure alone, but to the emotional content embedded in that pressure. Your skin, it turns out, can read the heart of the person whose hand is upon it. Think about that for a moment. Think about the sheer elegance of a system that can distinguish between a touch that means something and a touch that does not. Your skin is not a passive barrier. It is a vast sensory landscape, the largest organ in your body, and it is constantly, ceaselessly, in conversation with the world around it. It is reading temperature and texture and vibration, yes, but it is also reading something far more subtle. It is reading the presence or absence of safety. It is reading the presence or absence of love. And it is translating what it reads into the chemical language that your cells understand, converting the warmth of a hand into the warmth of oxytocin flowing through your bloodstream, transforming an external gesture of compassion into an internal command for peace. But here is where the story becomes even more remarkable. Because your body does not require physical contact to activate these pathways of connection. The same neural architecture that responds to gentle touch can be activated to a meaningful and measurable degree by experiences that carry the same emotional signature without any skin ever meeting skin. Consider the sound of a kind voice. Not the words themselves, but the tone, the cadence, the rhythm. A voice that is unhurried, warm, and steady activates regions of the brain associated with social bonding and safety, including areas that overlap with the processing of gentle touch. When someone speaks to you with genuine compassion, when their voice carries no edge of judgment or impatience, your auditory cortex processes the sound, but your limbic system processes the meaning. And that meaning is interpreted by your brain in much the same way as a hand placed softly on your arm. The vagus nerve, that long wandering nerve that connects your brainstem to your heart and gut and lungs, responds to the prosody of a caring voice by shifting your autonomic nervous system toward a state of calm. Heart rate slows, breathing deepens, and oxytocin begins to flow, not because you were touched, but because you were spoken to in a way that your body recognized as safe. And it goes further still. Research has shown that simply visualizing a loved one, calling to mind the face of someone who makes you feel genuinely safe and genuinely held, activates oxytocin pathways in the brain. Close your eyes for a moment and think of someone who has loved you well. Not perfectly, perhaps, but well. Someone in whose presence your shoulders have dropped, your breathing has slowed. Someone with whom silence felt like a conversation and proximity felt like medicine. Picture their face. Picture the way they looked at you in a moment of tenderness. The brain does not fully distinguish between this vivid internal image and the actual presence of that person. The same neural networks activate. The same neurochemical responses begin. Oxytocin levels rise. Cortisol levels fall. Your body responds to the memory of safety with the chemistry of safety. Because in the language your cells speak, a sincere and vivid recollection of love is love. This is the unseen touch. It is the touch that crosses distance and time, the touch that reaches you through a voice on a phone, through a memory summoned in a dark room, through the words of someone who wrote something kind and true and meant it with their whole heart, even though they would never meet you. Your body is not waiting exclusively for hands to be laid upon it. Your body is waiting for the signal of care, and that signal can arrive through any channel your senses can receive. And now I want to tell you about something that happens between two people that is so subtle, so quiet, that most of us have experienced it hundreds of times without ever knowing it had a name. It is called bio-oscillation, and it is the process by which one person's physiological state begins to synchronize with another's. When you sit beside someone who is deeply calm, whose heart rate is slow and steady, whose breathing is unhurried, whose nervous system is anchored in a state of safety, something begins to happen in your own body that you did not initiate and cannot consciously control. Your heart rate begins to slow, your breathing begins to deepen. Your autonomic nervous system, which has been scanning the environment for cues of threat or safety, detects in the rhythm of this other person's body a signal that it interprets as profoundly reassuring, and it begins to match that signal. It begins to resonate. This is not mysticism. This is measurable physiology. Studies have documented the synchronization of heart rates between mothers and infants, between therapists and patients, between romantic partners sitting in close proximity without speaking. The mechanism involves multiple channels, including subtle auditory cues from breathing patterns, visual processing of relaxed facial musculature and posture, and possibly even electromagnetic fields generated by cardiac activity, though this last pathway remains an area of active investigation. What is established beyond doubt is that human beings are biologically equipped to influence each other's internal states through their mere presence, and that when one nervous system broadcasts a signal of safety, nearby nervous systems receive that signal and are drawn toward coherence with it. Think of it this way. Imagine a dark room in which a single candle is burning. The flame does not reach out and force light into the corners. It does not diminish itself by illuminating the space around it. It simply burns steadily and without effort, and the room arranges itself around its warmth. The darkness does not fight the light. It simply becomes less. This is what happens when a person grounded in calm enters the orbit of a person locked in distress. The calm does not argue with the fear. It does not try to convince the fear that it is wrong. It simply offers an alternative rhythm, a different frequency, and the distressed nervous system, which has been desperate for a signal of safety it could not generate on its own, begins to entrain to that frequency. Oxytocin rises in both bodies. Cortisol falls in both bodies. The resonance is mutual, reciprocal, and it costs the giver nothing, because peace, unlike energy, is not depleted by being shared. It is amplified. This is the resonance of intention. It is not enough to simply be near another person. What matters is the state from which you are present. A body filled with its own anxiety and urgency, no matter how well-meaning, broadcasts a signal that other nervous systems detect as dissonance rather than harmony. But a body that has done the quiet, patient work of finding its own center, a body that breathes slowly and holds space without grasping, becomes a tuning fork for every nervous system in its proximity. This is why the presence of certain people makes you feel safe before they have spoken a single word. This is why a hand placed on your shoulder by someone who is genuinely at peace can dissolve a tension that hours of reassurance could not touch. The hand matters, yes, but what matters more is what is behind the hand. What matters is the state of the nervous system that guides it. Your skin knows this. Your C-tactile afferents know this. The deep, ancient parts of your brain that process the emotional content of touch and presence and voice know this. They are not fooled by gestures that are empty of intention, and they are not unmoved by intention that arrives without gesture. They are reading, always reading, the vast and intricate story that every person around you is telling with their body, their breath, their heartbeat, their eyes. And they are translating that story, moment by moment, into the chemical language that governs whether your cells defend or repair, whether your mitochondria produce the energy of survival or the energy of growth, whether your body remains a fortress or remembers that it was always meant to be a garden. This is the sensory language of belonging. It is written in the firing of specialized nerve fibers and the release of ancient molecules. It is spoken in the cadence of a voice that means you no harm, and the rhythm of a heart that has found its rest. It is heard by every cell in your body, and it is answered with a willingness to open, to soften, to trust that is so immediate and so complete that it can feel like something miraculous, something beyond the reach of science to explain. But it is not beyond science. It is science at its most beautiful, biology at its most compassionate, evolution at its most wise. You were built for this. You were built to send and receive these signals of safety, to be both the candle and the room it illuminates, to carry within your skin a sensory world so rich and so finely tuned that the mere presence of love can rewrite the chemistry of your entire being. And here is what I want you to hold as we move forward together. This feeling of belonging, this neurochemical state of connection and resonance that can be triggered by a touch, a voice, a memory, a presence. It does not simply make you feel better. It does not merely comfort the mind or warm the heart in some poetic, intangible way. It reaches deeper than emotion. It reaches past mood and thought and feeling, down into the smallest functional units of your body, into the cells themselves. And there, in the quiet interior of each cell, where mitochondria hum and membranes pulse and DNA coils and uncoils in rhythms too small to see, this signal of belonging becomes something more than a feeling. It becomes a catalyst. It becomes the chemical key that unlocks your body's deepest capacity for repair, for regeneration, for the kind of healing that does not merely patch what is broken, but rebuilds it from the foundation upward. And it is into that process, that extraordinary cellular renewal made possible by the resonance of connection, that we are about to descend. There is a question your body asks every moment of every day. A question so fundamental, so deeply woven into the architecture of your biology, that you will never hear it spoken aloud. It is not a question your conscious mind formulates. It is not a question you would think to ask yourself as you move through the ordinary hours of your life. And yet it is being asked ceaselessly by systems far older and far wiser than the part of you that thinks in words. The question is this: am I alone? Am I alone in this? Or is there someone, something, some presence beyond the borders of my own skin that knows I am here and cares that I continue? Your body asks this question not out of sentiment, it asks it out of survival. Because the answer to this question determines, at the deepest cellular level, whether your biology heals or whether it simply endures. This is the principle that researchers have come to call social homeostasis, and it represents one of the most profound shifts in our understanding of human health in the last several decades. For a long time, we understood homeostasis as an internal affair, the body's ability to regulate its own temperature, its own pH, its own blood sugar, its own fluid balance, through elegant feedback loops that required nothing from the outside world except food and water and air. And that understanding was correct as far as it went, but it did not go far enough. Because what we now know, what the science of the last 20 years has made undeniably clear, is that the human body monitors its social environment with the same rigor, the same sensitivity, the same biological urgency with which it monitors its oxygen levels or its core temperature. Your body does not merely prefer connection, it requires it. It tracks it. It adjusts its internal chemistry based on whether connection is present or absent, the way a thermostat adjusts heat based on the temperature of the room. When your brain perceives that you belong, when it receives consistent signals that you are part of a group, a family, a community, a bond that extends beyond the boundaries of your individual existence, it interprets this information as a fundamental safety cue, and in response, it does something remarkable. It initiates a sustained, long-term pattern of oxytocin release that is qualitatively different from the brief surges triggered by a single embrace or a moment of eye contact. This is not a spike that rises and falls within minutes. This is a slow, steady, continuous tide that reshapes the internal landscape of your body over days, weeks, months, and years. It is the difference between a single rain shower and a season of gentle, nourishing rainfall that transforms an entire ecosystem. Under the influence of this sustained oxytocin release, your biology shifts in ways that are both measurable and extraordinary. Protein synthesis increases. Your cells, receiving the ongoing chemical message that the world is safe and resources can be devoted to construction rather than defense, begin producing the structural and functional proteins that your tissues need to maintain themselves and to grow. Collagen production in connective tissues is supported. Muscle fibers repair with greater efficiency. The epithelial cells that line your gut and your blood vessels, cells that turn over rapidly and depend on a steady supply of new proteins to replace the old, receive the resources and the chemical permission they need to renew themselves at the pace your health requires. Your immune system, that vast and intricate network of cells and signals that stands between you and every pathogen the world contains, undergoes a recalibration so sophisticated that immunologists are still mapping its full extent. In a state of chronic stress, in the absence of social safety cues, the immune system becomes dysregulated in a pattern that is both dangerous and paradoxical. Inflammation increases, driven by pro-inflammatory cytokines that circulate at elevated levels, creating a state of low-grade, systemic inflammation that damages tissues and contributes to nearly every chronic disease we know. And yet, simultaneously, the immune system's ability to mount a targeted, effective response to actual pathogens decreases. The body becomes inflamed and vulnerable at the same time, burning energy on a generalized defensive posture while losing its capacity for precise, intelligent immune action. This is the immunological signature of loneliness. This is what happens when the body's answer to its most fundamental question is, yes, I am alone. But when belonging is present, when oxytocin flows in that sustained, steady pattern that signals ongoing social safety, the immune system rebalances. Pro-inflammatory cytokine levels decrease. Anti-inflammatory pathways are upregulated. The immune cells themselves, the T cells and natural killer cells and macrophages that form the front line of your body's defense, begin to function with greater specificity and greater efficiency. Inflammation resolves. The body stops burning itself with its own defense mechanisms and returns to a state of intelligent, calibrated immune readiness. You become not just less inflamed, but more genuinely protected, because an immune system operating from a foundation of safety is an immune system that can allocate its resources wisely rather than scattering them in every direction at once. I want you to imagine a ship, not a ship in a storm, though we will begin there, but a ship that has been in a storm for so long that the crew has forgotten there was ever anything else. The waves have been crashing for months, for years. The hull groans, the sails are torn. Every hand on board is devoted to bailing water and lashing ropes and bracing against the next impact. No one is sleeping. No one is eating a proper meal. No one is repairing the damage to the deck or the rigging, because there is no time. There is never time. There is only the next wave, and the next, and the next. This is what chronic loneliness does to the human body. Every resource is devoted to survival. Nothing is left for maintenance. Nothing is left for repair. The ship stays afloat, but it deteriorates with every passing day. Now imagine that this ship, battered and exhausted, rounds a headland and sees before it a harbour, a calm, protected harbour where the water is flat and the wind drops to nothing and the waves cannot reach. The crew does not need to be told what to do. They know. They drop the anchor, they lower the sails, they sit down, some of them weep. And then, slowly, with hands that are finally free because they are no longer gripping ropes for dear life, they begin to repair the ship. They patch the hull, they mend the sails, they scrub the deck and replace the broken timbers and do all the work that was impossible while the storm was raging. The ship does not merely survive, it is made whole again. The harbour did not repair the ship, but the harbour gave the crew the conditions under which repair became possible. This is what belonging does for your body. It is the harbour. It is the place where your biology can finally put down its tools of defense and pick up its tools of restoration. The feeling of belonging does not require perfection. It does not require a large family or a wide circle of friends or a romantic partner or any specific configuration of social life that the world might tell you is necessary. What it requires is the perception, deep in the ancient monitoring systems of your brain, that you are not alone in the dark, that somewhere, someone or something holds an awareness of your existence and regards it with warmth. This perception can be generated by a single, reliable relationship. It can be generated by a connection to a community, however small. It can be generated, and this is something I want you to hear very carefully, by a felt connection to something larger than the human social world entirely. A connection to the natural world, to the forest or the ocean or the sky at night. A connection to a sense of meaning or purpose that transcends the individual self. A connection, if this resonates with you, to the vast and ancient web of life that preceded you and will continue long after you are gone. Because what your biology is monitoring is not a roster of names. It is not counting your contacts or measuring the frequency of your social engagements. What it is monitoring is a felt sense of inclusion in something beyond yourself. It is tracking whether the nervous system perceives itself as an isolated unit, alone and unsupported in a vast and indifferent world, or as a node in a network, a root in a system of roots, connected to sources of support that extend in every direction beneath the surface of what is visible. Think of the trees in an ancient forest. Above ground, they appear to stand alone, each trunk separate, each canopy distinct. But beneath the soil, their root systems are intertwined in a network so dense and so cooperative that scientists have given it a name. They call it the Wood Wide Web. Through this underground network, trees share nutrients. They send chemical warning signals when one of them is under attack by insects. They channel sugars from areas of abundance to areas of need. A tree that appears to stand alone is, in biological reality, held by every tree around it. It is fed by them. It is warned by them. It is kept alive by them in times of drought and disease. And because of this network, because no tree truly stands alone, the entire forest is more resilient than any individual tree could ever be. You are like this. Your biology is like this. You were never designed to stand alone. The monitoring systems in your brain, the ones that track your social environment with the same vigilance they apply to your oxygen levels, are not a flaw. They are not a weakness. They are not evidence of neediness or dependence. They are evidence of a design so intelligent, so deeply attuned to the realities of survival on this planet that it built the need for connection into the very chemistry of your cells. You need others, not because you are incomplete, but because completion, in the biological sense, has always been a collaborative process. Your immune system functions better when you belong. Your hormones balance more effectively when you belong. Your heart, the physical muscle in your chest, operates with greater efficiency and less strain when the nervous system in which it is embedded perceives that it is not alone. And this brings me to the heart itself, because the heart is not merely a pump, though it is an extraordinary pump. The heart is a listening organ. It is densely innervated by both the sympathetic and parasympathetic branches of the autonomic nervous system, and it responds to every shift in the balance between these two branches with changes in its rate, its rhythm, its contractile force, and the pattern of its beat-to-beat variability. In a state of chronic stress, in a state of perceived isolation, the sympathetic branch dominates. The heart beats faster. Its rhythm becomes more rigid, less variable, and this loss of variability, paradoxically, is a sign not of stability, but of strain. A healthy heart, a heart at peace, beats with a subtle, complex variability that reflects the dynamic interplay of multiple regulatory systems working in harmony. It speeds up slightly with each inhalation. It slows slightly with each exhalation. It dances. It breathes. It responds to the world with a flexibility that is the hallmark of resilience. But a heart under siege, a heart locked in the sympathetic grip of loneliness and threat, loses this dance. Its rhythm becomes monotonous, mechanical, like a metronome that has forgotten it was once part of an orchestra. When belonging is restored, when oxytocin flows and the parasympathetic branch of the nervous system, carried by the vagus nerve, regains its rightful influence, the heart relaxes. Not in the sense of stopping or slowing dangerously, but in the sense of softening. The muscle fibers of the ventricular walls, which have been contracting with the excessive force demanded by chronic sympathetic activation, ease their grip. Blood pressure decreases, the workload on the heart diminishes, and the rhythm, that beautiful, complex, variable rhythm, returns. The heart begins to dance again. It begins to breathe again. It remembers that it is not a machine built to endure. It is a living organ built to respond, to feel, to reflect in its every beat the state of the world around it and the safety of the soul it serves. This is the biological anchor. This is what it means, in the language of your cells, to come home, not to a place, but to a state in which your body finally receives the answer it has been waiting for to the question it never stops asking. No, you are not alone. You are held. You are part of something. You are woven into a web of connection that is as real and as measurable as the oxygen in your blood. And in the presence of that connection, your biology does what it was always meant to do. It heals, it builds, it restores, it rests. And within this resting, within this deep biological peace that belonging makes possible, there is a conversation happening that we have not yet explored. It is a conversation between two organs that are connected by more than anatomy, two organs that speak to each other in a language of electrical impulses and chemical signals and rhythmic patterns that science is only now beginning to decode. One of those organs is the heart. the other is the brain. And the dialogue between them, the constant bidirectional flow of information that shapes everything from your emotional state to your capacity for intuition to the very way you perceive the world around you, holds a key to understanding healing at a depth most of us have never considered. It is to that conversation, that extraordinary dialogue between the heart and the mind, that we now turn our attention. You have been told your entire life that the brain is in charge, that the brain is the master, the commander, the seat of everything you are and everything you do. And in many ways, this is true. Your brain is extraordinary. It is the most complex structure we have ever discovered in the known universe. A 3-pound cathedral of neural connections so vast in number that they exceed the stars in our galaxy. But tonight, I want to gently and respectfully challenge something you may have always assumed. I want to suggest to you that the brain is not alone in its authority, that there is another organ in your body that speaks to your brain not as a servant but as a partner, not as a follower but as a guide, and that the conversation between these two organs shapes your emotional life, your mental clarity, your capacity for peace, and your ability to heal in ways that science is only now beginning to fully appreciate. That organ is your heart, and it has been leading this conversation far more than you ever knew. Inside your heart, embedded in the muscular walls of this organ that beats approximately 100,000 times every day of your life, there is a nervous system, not a metaphorical nervous system, not a poetic abstraction, an actual physical network of approximately 40,000 neurons that form what cardiologists and neuroscientists have come to call the intrinsic cardiac nervous system, or more simply, the little brain of the heart. These neurons are not passive relay stations, merely transmitting signals from the brain to the cardiac muscle. They process information independently. They sense, they remember, they make decisions about heart rate, rhythm, and contractile force based on local conditions, and they do so with a degree of autonomy that surprised researchers when it was first fully characterized. Your heart thinks, not in the way your brain thinks, not in words or images or abstract concepts, but in patterns, in rhythms, in the steady, intelligent regulation of the most vital muscular process in your body. And this little brain does not work in isolation. It is in constant, dynamic, bidirectional communication with the brain in your skull, and the primary highway for that communication is the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is the longest cranial nerve in your body. It wanders from your brainstem down through your neck, past your throat, through your chest, and into your abdomen, touching nearly every major organ along the way. And while we often think of neural communication as flowing from the brain downward, as commands sent from headquarters to the outposts of the body, the reality of the vagus nerve is far more balanced. Approximately 80% of the fibers in the vagus nerve are afferent fibers, meaning they carry information upward from the body to the brain. And the single largest source of that upward information is the heart. Your heart is sending more messages to your brain than your brain is sending to your heart. It is not waiting for instructions. It is providing them. The quality of these messages depends entirely on the state of the heart itself. When the heart is under stress, when the sympathetic nervous system is dominant and cortisol and adrenaline are circulating at high levels, the heart's rhythm becomes irregular and disordered, not in the dramatic sense of a clinical arrhythmia, but in a subtler sense that is captured by a measurement called heart rate variability. In a stressed state, the pattern of beat-to-beat intervals becomes jagged, chaotic, erratic, and the signals the heart sends to the brain through the vagus nerve carry this chaos with them. They arrive at the brainstem, at the medulla, and from there they are relayed to the amygdala, which interprets the disordered rhythm as further confirmation of threat, and to the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for clear thinking, planning, and emotional regulation, where the chaotic input degrades function. The result is a brain that cannot think clearly, cannot regulate its emotions effectively, cannot access the higher cognitive functions that allow you to see the world with perspective and nuance. The mental fog, the racing thoughts, the inability to focus, the sense that your mind is full of noise and you cannot find the quiet beneath it. These are not failures of willpower. They are the direct neurological consequence of a heart sending disordered signals to a brain that is doing its best to make sense of them. Now, consider what happens when the pattern changes. When oxytocin enters this system, it acts upon the heart with a specificity and a gentleness that is remarkable even by the standards of molecular biology. Oxytocin receptors are present throughout the cardiac tissue, in the atria, in the ventricles, in the walls of the coronary arteries, and within the intrinsic cardiac nervous system itself. When oxytocin binds to these receptors, it shifts the heart's rhythm toward a state that researchers call coherence. This is a technical term with a precise meaning. In a coherent state, the pattern of heart rate variability becomes smooth, ordered, and wave-like. It takes on a sinusoidal pattern, a gentle rolling rhythm that rises and falls with the breath in a way that reflects the perfect balance between sympathetic and parasympathetic input. It is the rhythm of a heart at peace, and when this rhythm is established, the signals the heart sends upward through the vagus nerve change completely. Imagine two dancers, not dancers performing for an audience, not dancers executing a choreographed routine, but two people who have danced together so many times for so many years that their bodies know each other the way the tide knows the moon. One leads and the other follows, but the roles shift so fluidly that an observer could not tell you which is which. They move as a single organism. They breathe together. They turn together. They pause together. And in their pauses there is no uncertainty, only the shared understanding that the next movement will arise when the time is right and not a moment before. This is heart-brain coherence. The heart sends its smooth, ordered rhythm to the brain. The brain receives it and recognizes it as a signal of safety and stability. The amygdala, bathed in this coherent input, reduces its vigilance. The panic subsides, not because the amygdala has been silenced or overridden, but because it has received from the heart itself the evidence it needed to conclude that there is nothing to fear. And the prefrontal cortex, no longer bombarded by chaotic signals that degrade its function, begins to operate with a clarity and an expansiveness that many people have not experienced in years. Thought becomes clearer. Perspective broadens. The mind, which had been a room full of shouting voices, becomes a room with a single, steady light. And in that light, everything that was confusing becomes simple, and everything that was frightening becomes manageable. This is what coherence feels like from the inside. It is not the absence of thought. It is not a blank, empty stillness. It is a state of such profound internal order that the mind becomes a clean instrument, capable of perceiving reality without the distortion of fear, capable of responding to the world with wisdom rather than reactivity, capable of resting even while it is awake. And the architect of this state is not the brain, it is the heart. The heart, filled with oxytocin, beating in its coherent rhythm, is the source of the signal that organizes the mind. But the heart's influence does not stop at the boundaries of the vagus nerve. And here, I want to share something with you that may stretch the edges of what you thought biology could explain. Though every word of it is grounded in measurement and observation, your heart generates an electromagnetic field. Every time it contracts, every time the electrical impulse travels through the cardiac muscle in the coordinated wave that produces a heartbeat, it generates a field that extends beyond the surface of your body. This field is the strongest electromagnetic field produced by any organ in your body. It is approximately 60 times greater in amplitude than the electromagnetic field generated by the brain. And it can be detected several feet away from the body using sensitive instruments called magnetometers. You are, in a very literal sense, broadcasting the state of your heart into the space around you with every beat. When the heart is in a state of coherence, when oxytocin has brought its rhythm into that smooth, ordered, wave-like pattern, the electromagnetic field it generates carries this coherence outward. And within the body itself, this field interacts with the electrical activity of the brain in ways that researchers are still working to fully characterize, but that point towards something extraordinary. The coherent cardiac field appears to entrain brainwave patterns towards states associated with deep relaxation and heightened awareness. Electroencephalographic studies have shown that when heart rate variability patterns shift into coherence, there are corresponding shifts in brainwave activity, particularly an increase in alpha wave patterns, the patterns associated with calm alertness, with the state between waking and sleeping, with the kind of peaceful, receptive consciousness that meditators spend years learning to cultivate. The heart, through its electromagnetic influence, is not merely communicating with the brain through the vagus nerve. It is bathing the brain in a field that gently, persistently nudges its electrical activity toward peace. Think of a lighthouse, not the dramatic lighthouse of a stormy painting, battered by waves and wind, but a lighthouse on a calm night, its beam turning slowly and steadily through a soft fog. The fog is the noise of the mind, the chatter, the worry, the endless replaying of the past and rehearsing of the future that fills the mental space of nearly every human being alive. And the beam is the heart's coherence signal, cutting through that fog not with force, but with rhythm. Not by dispersing the fog all at once, but by providing a steady, reliable point of reference around which the mind can orient itself. Each time the beam passes, the fog thins a little. Each rotation brings a little more clarity, and gradually, so gradually that you may not notice the moment it happens, the fog lifts entirely, and what remains is a vast, clear, open expanse of awareness that was always there beneath the noise, waiting to be revealed. This is what your heart does for your mind when it is allowed to operate in coherence. It does not fight the mind's chaos. It does not argue with the mind's fears. It simply offers, beat after beat after beat, a rhythm so steady, so ordered, so deeply grounded in the chemistry of safety that the brain's own electrical patterns cannot help but be drawn toward it. The chatter quiets, the panic recedes, the static clears, and what emerges is not emptiness, but fullness, a fullness of clarity, a fullness of presence, a fullness of the kind of awareness that allows you to perceive the world not through the narrow lens of threat, but through the wide, generous lens of a mind that is finally, truly at rest. Your heart is not a victim of your emotions. This is one of the most important things I can tell you tonight. For too long, we have spoken of the heart as though it were at the mercy of the mind, as though emotions happened in the brain and the heart merely suffered their consequences. But the science of heart-brain coherence reveals something far more empowering. Your heart is a master regulator. It is the organ that, when brought into coherence through the influence of oxytocin and the activation of the parasympathetic nervous system, has the power to organize the mind, to calm the amygdala, to clarify the prefrontal cortex, and to shift the entire electromagnetic environment of your body toward a state of peace. You do not need to think your way to calm. You can feel your way there. You can breathe your way there. You can touch your way there. Because every pathway that increases oxytocin and activates the vagus nerve is a pathway that brings the heart into coherence. And a coherent heart will do what no amount of mental effort can accomplish alone. It will quiet the mind not by silencing it, but by giving it something beautiful to listen to. And here is what I want you to carry with you as we move deeper into this journey together. When your heart and your brain are in coherence, when the internal world is organized around the rhythm of safety and oxytocin flows through every chamber and vessel and nerve, something happens that transcends the boundaries of your own body. The peace you feel inside begins to express itself outward, not as an idea, not as a decision, but as a natural, effortless emanation, the way warmth radiates from a fire or light from a star. Your eyes soften, your voice deepens and slows. Your presence becomes, without any conscious effort on your part, a source of calm for every nervous system you encounter. The coherence that the heart has created within you begins to ripple outward into the world. And it manifests in the most human, the most ancient, the most necessary of capacities. It manifests as kindness. It manifests as empathy. It manifests as the ability to see another person's pain not as a threat to be defended against, but as a call to be answered with the same grace and the same safety that your own heart has learned to provide. And it is to this outward expression, this extraordinary translation of inner coherence into outer compassion, that we now turn. There is something that happens inside you when you are kind that no one ever told you about. Something that goes far deeper than the warmth you feel in your chest, far beyond the satisfaction of knowing you have done something good. When you extend kindness to another human being, when you offer your time, your presence, your compassion without expectation of return, your body does not merely witness this act from a distance. It participates, it responds, it changes. At the level of your nervous system, your hormones, your immune cells, your very DNA, something shifts. And that shift is not a metaphor. It is not a spiritual abstraction. It is measurable, reproducible, and profound. Kindness is not just something you do. It is something that happens to you, inside you, at the deepest level your biology can reach. To understand how this works, we need to return to the vagus nerve, that long, wandering pathway we have spoken of before, the nerve that connects your brainstem to your heart, your lungs, your gut, and nearly every major organ in your body. The vagus nerve is the primary channel through which your parasympathetic nervous system, your system of rest and restoration, communicates with your body. And the strength of this communication, the efficiency and responsiveness of this nerve, is measured by something called vagal tone. Think of vagal tone as the fitness of your nervous system's calming pathway. A person with high vagal tone has a vagus nerve that responds quickly and powerfully to signals of safety, bringing the heart rate down efficiently after moments of stress, regulating digestion smoothly, supporting immune function with precision, and facilitating the kind of rapid recovery from emotional and physical challenges that we associate with resilience. A person with low vagal tone has a vagus nerve that responds sluggishly, leaving the body stranded in states of stress for longer than necessary, struggling to return to baseline, accumulating the damage that comes from spending too much time in sympathetic overdrive. Here is what researchers have discovered about vagal tone that changes everything. It is not fixed. It is not something you are born with and must simply accept, the way you accept the color of your eyes. Vagal tone can be strengthened. It can be trained. And one of the most powerful, most reliable, most thoroughly documented ways to increase vagal tone is through the practice of kindness and compassion. This is not wishful thinking. This is the finding of longitudinal studies conducted at major research institutions.
Studies in which participants who engaged in regular practices of loving kindness and compassionate action showed significant increases in vagal tone over periods as short as several weeks.
Their vagus nerves became stronger, more responsive, more efficient at doing the single most important thing the vagus nerve does, which is telling the body that it is safe enough to heal. The mechanism behind this is elegant in its simplicity. When you perform an act of kindness, when you give to another person in a way that is genuine and freely chosen, your brain releases a cascade of neurochemicals that act upon the vagus nerve and the organs it innervates. Oxytocin surges, binding to receptors in the heart and gut and brain, initiating the cascade of safety and restoration we have already explored. But oxytocin does not arrive alone. It is accompanied by dopamine, the molecule of reward and motivation, which activates the mesolimbic pathway, the same pathway stimulated by music you love, by food that nourishes you, by every experience your brain categorizes as good and worth repeating. And alongside the dopamine, there is serotonin, the molecule that stabilizes mood and promotes a sense of well-being and contentment that is deeper and more enduring than the bright flash of pleasure. Together, these three molecules create what researchers have called the helper's high, a physiological state that is not merely pleasant but genuinely therapeutic. The helper's high is real. It has been measured. It has been documented in brain imaging studies that show activation of reward centers during and after acts of generosity. It has been tracked in blood samples that reveal elevated oxytocin and reduced cortisol in people who have just performed compassionate actions. And its effects extend far beyond the moment of the act itself. Because when this neurochemical cascade occurs repeatedly, when kindness becomes not an isolated event but a pattern, a practice, a way of moving through the world, the vagus nerve adapts. It strengthens. Its tone increases. And with that increase comes a fundamental shift in the body's baseline state. A shift away from chronic inflammation and toward balanced, intelligent immune function. A shift away from the hormonal profile of stress and toward the hormonal profile of safety. A shift that tells every cell in the body, through the only language those cells understand, that the world this organism inhabits is one worth repairing itself for. Let me tell you what this means for inflammation. because inflammation is the silent current beneath so many of the diseases that diminish and shorten human lives. Chronic low-grade inflammation, the kind driven by sustained cortisol elevation and sympathetic nervous system dominance, is implicated in cardiovascular disease, in diabetes, in depression, in neurodegenerative conditions, in autoimmune disorders, in the accelerated aging of tissues and organs that should have decades of healthy function remaining. This inflammation is not caused by a single event. It is caused by a state, a sustained biological state of perceived threat and isolation that keeps pro-inflammatory pathways activated long past the point of usefulness. And kindness, through its effect on vagal tone and its triggering of the oxytocin dopamine serotonin cascade, directly opposes this state. It reduces the circulation of pro-inflammatory cytokines. It increases the activity of anti-inflammatory pathways. It shifts gene expression, actual gene expression, the reading and implementation of the instructions encoded in your DNA, away from inflammatory programs and toward programs of cellular maintenance and repair. People who regularly engage in compassionate action have measurably lower levels of systemic inflammation. Their bodies are not merely feeling better, their bodies are aging more slowly. And there is something even more remarkable that I want you to know. You do not have to perform the act of kindness yourself to receive its benefits. Merely witnessing an act of kindness, observing another person extending compassion to a stranger, is enough to trigger a measurable increase in oxytocin levels and a corresponding improvement in immune function. Researchers have called this the elevation effect, and it reveals something profound about the architecture of your nervous system. You are wired not only to benefit from your own compassion, but to benefit from the compassion you see around you. Your biology is listening to the moral quality of your environment with the same attentiveness it brings to temperature and sound and light. And when it detects kindness in the world, it responds as if that kindness were directed at you. It takes the goodness it witnesses and translates it into the chemistry of safety. Imagine a single drop of ink falling into a clear glass of water. Watch the color spread. It does not rush. It does not force its way through the liquid. It simply expands, slowly, gracefully, reaching into every corner of the glass with an inevitability that has nothing to do with effort and everything to do with the nature of what it is. A drop of ink colors water because that is what ink does when it meets water. And kindness colors a room because that is what kindness does when it meets the human nervous system. One act of genuine compassion, witnessed by others, does not remain a single act. It ripples, it multiplies. The observer's oxytocin rises, their vagal tone improves, their body shifts, even if only slightly, toward the state of safety and restoration. And from that shifted state, they become more likely, not through obligation but through genuine inclination, to extend kindness themselves. The frequency propagates. The water changes color. This brings me to something that has been observed in laboratory settings and in real-world environments that speaks to the extraordinary power of compassion as a biological force. When groups of people share an experience of kindness, when they witness or participate in acts of generosity and care in the same space at the same time, their physiological states begin to synchronize. Heart rates align, breathing patterns coordinate, autonomic nervous system activity, measured by skin conductance and heart rate variability, moves toward coherence across the group. Kindness does not merely affect the individual, It synchronizes the collective. It creates a shared physiological state, that is, in the most literal sense, a state of resonance, a state in which multiple nervous systems vibrate at the same frequency of safety and trust. This is not a weakness. I need you to hear this clearly, because the world has spent a very long time telling a different story. The world has often told us that compassion is soft, that kindness is naive, that empathy is a liability in a competitive and dangerous environment. But the biology tells a different story entirely. Compassion is not the strategy of the weak. It is the most advanced survival strategy the human species has ever developed. It is encoded into your molecules. It is wired into your nervous system. It has been refined by millions of years of evolutionary pressure, not because it made individuals softer, but because it made groups stronger. The communities that survived the harshest conditions on this planet were not the communities composed of the most ruthless individuals. They were the communities in which individuals could coordinate, could trust, could sacrifice for one another, could feel another person's pain as if it were their own and be moved to act. Compassion is the technology that allowed a physically unremarkable primate with no claws, no fangs, no protective hide to become the dominant species on Earth. It did this not by making us harder, but by making us connected. Think of a warm light in a dark room. Not a spotlight, not a floodlight, not a harsh and blinding illumination that exposes everything and comforts nothing. A warm light, a gentle light, the kind of light that comes from a single source and fills a room not by overpowering the darkness, but by offering an alternative to it. This is what compassion does in a world that can feel overwhelmingly cold. It does not eliminate the darkness. It does not pretend the darkness does not exist. It simply offers warmth, and in offering warmth, it changes the experience of everyone who stands within its reach. And your body, your biology, your nervous system, your immune cells, your mitochondria, your very genes respond to this warmth with a gratitude that expresses itself not in words, but in chemistry, in reduced inflammation, in enhanced immune function, in cellular repair, in the quiet, steady, miraculous process of a body that has been given the signal it needs to begin restoring itself. The luminescence of the heart is not a metaphor. When your heart is filled with compassion, when kindness flows from you as naturally as breath, the oxytocin that suffuses your cardiac tissue, the coherent rhythm that your heart generates, the electromagnetic field that extends from your chest into the space around you. All of these become carriers of a frequency that your body and the bodies around you interpret as the deepest form of safety. This is the kindness frequency. It is the vibration of a biology that has remembered its purpose, a biology that has moved beyond mere survival and into the territory of meaning, of contribution, of the profound recognition that your well-being and the well-being of others are not separate accounts to be balanced against each other, but a single, shared reservoir that rises and falls together. Every act of kindness you perform fills this reservoir. Every act of kindness you witness fills it. Every moment of compassion, whether directed inward toward yourself or outward toward a stranger, sends a chemical signal through your body that says, this life is not just safe, it is good. It is worth inhabiting fully. It is worth repairing with care. And your cells, receiving this signal, respond with the only thing they know how to give, which is their best work, their most diligent repair, their most faithful renewal. And as we sit with this understanding, as we feel the warmth of what compassion does inside us and between us, I want to carry you back now, gently, toward a question that has been waiting beneath everything we have explored tonight. Where did this come from? How did this extraordinary capacity for empathy, this molecular architecture of kindness, come to exist in our bodies and our brains? The answer takes us back, far back, beyond recorded history, beyond civilization, beyond even the emergence of our species as we know it, into the deep, ancient nights when our ancestors huddled together against dangers they could not face alone. It takes us to the fires they built and the bonds they forged and the silent, powerful agreement that echoed through their biology and echoes still through yours. The agreement that said, we will survive this, but only if we survive it together. And it is to those ancestral roots, to the origin of this extraordinary empathy that lives in your every cell, that we now turn. Close your eyes and come with me. Come back, not days, not years. Come back thousands of generations, past every city that has ever risen and fallen, past every empire, every monument, every written word, past the invention of agriculture and the first tentative settlements beside rivers, past the age of cave paintings and carved bone, back and back and back, until you stand on an open plain beneath a sky so full of stars. It looks like the earth is wearing a crown of light. The air is cold. The darkness beyond the reach of the fire is absolute. And somewhere in that darkness, something is moving. Something with teeth, something with patience, something that weighs 3 times what you weigh and can run twice as fast. You are a human being, and by every objective measure of physical capability, you should not survive this night. You have no claws. Your teeth are blunt and small. Your skin is soft and tears easily. You cannot outrun the predators that share this landscape with you. You cannot outfight them. You cannot see in the dark. You cannot hear as acutely as the animals that hunt you or smell the wind the way they can. By every metric that evolution has traditionally used to determine which species flourishes and which species disappears, you are outmatched. And yet here you are. Here we are. 7 billion descendants of that vulnerable creature standing on that dark plain, having not only survived but having come to dominate every ecosystem on this planet. How did the weakest body on the savannah produce the most successful species the Earth has ever known? The answer is not tools, though tools helped. It is not intelligence, though intelligence was essential. The answer is something older than both, something that preceded the first stone blade and the first controlled fire, something that made the development of tools and intelligence possible in the first place. The answer is each other. The answer is the extraordinary, neurochemically driven capacity to cooperate, to trust, to feel what another member of your group is feeling, and to act on that feeling as though their survival and your survival were the same thing, because they always were. Your ancestors survived because of oxytocin. Not oxytocin alone, of course. Survival is never the product of a single molecule, but oxytocin was the chemical foundation upon which everything else was built. It was the molecule that made bonding possible, that made trust possible, that made the kind of sustained, self-sacrificing cooperation possible that turned a group of physically vulnerable individuals into a collective organism so powerful that no predator, No drought, no ice age, no catastrophe could extinguish it. When one member of the group felt fear, the others felt it too, not because they could see the threat, but because the neurochemistry of empathy allowed them to literally share the emotional state of another nervous system. When one member was injured, the others were compelled, not by conscious calculation, but by deep biological imperative, to care for them, to protect them, to give up food and sleep and safety so that the wounded could recover. This was not altruism in the abstract philosophical sense. This was survival strategy at its most sophisticated, encoded into the nervous system by millions of years of evolutionary pressure that ruthlessly eliminated every lineage that could not cooperate and rewarded every lineage that could. In those ancient tribes, numbering perhaps 20 to 50 individuals, the nervous systems of the group members were in constant communication. Not through words, though early language played a role, but through the deeper, older channels we have already explored. Through touch, through the sound of breathing in a shared shelter, through the sight of relaxed faces around a fire, through the bio-oscillation that occurs when bodies in close proximity begin to synchronize their heart rates and their hormonal rhythms. The tribe was not just a social unit, it was a physiological unit, a nervous system of nervous systems, each one calibrating its internal state based on the signals it received from the others, each one contributing to a shared chemical environment in which the sustained, collective release of oxytocin created what we might call an oxytocin shield, a neurochemical field of safety that no individual could have generated alone. Inside this shield, cortisol levels remained low. The fight or flight response, while always ready to surge when genuine danger appeared, spent most of its time at baseline because the presence of the group provided the amygdala with a continuous stream of safety cues. We are here. We are watching. You can rest. Under this constant reassurance, the bodies of your ancestors could devote their energy to growth and repair rather than defense. Immune systems functioned optimally. Wounds healed efficiently. Children developed in neurological environments rich in the signals of safety that are essential for healthy brain maturation. The tribe did not merely protect its members from external threats. It created an internal biological environment in which health was possible, an environment in which the body could do its best work because it felt at the deepest cellular level that it was not alone. And here is what I need you to understand about yourself, about the body you inhabit right now as you listen to these words. That genetic coding has not changed. The DNA that built the nervous systems of your most ancient ancestors is the same DNA that built yours. The receptors are the same. The neural pathways are the same. The molecules are the same. Your amygdala still scans for the presence of the tribe. Your vagus nerve still calibrates its tone based on whether it detects the signals of social safety or social isolation. Your hypothalamus still produces oxytocin in response to the same cues that triggered its release around a fire on a dark plain 100,000 years ago. You are carrying, in every cell of your body, the complete biological architecture of tribal belonging. It is not atrophied. It is not evolved away. It is as alive and as functional as it was the night your ancestors huddled together and discovered that they were stronger as a circle than they could ever be, as scattered points. But the world you inhabit is profoundly different from the one in which this architecture was forged. You do not live in a band of 20 to 50 people who share every meal and sleep within arm's reach and spend every waking hour in each other's company. You may live alone. You may work in isolation. You may go entire days without meaningful physical contact, without the kind of slow, warm, intentional touch that activates the tactile afferents in your skin. You may spend more time looking at screens than looking into eyes, more time reading text than hearing voices, more time in environments designed for efficiency than in environments designed for connection. And your nervous system, that ancient, exquisitely sensitive monitoring system, registers all of this. It registers the absence of the tribe. It notes the missing signals. And it responds the only way it knows how. It raises the alert. It increases cortisol. It shifts the body toward defense. Not because you are in danger, but because, in the language of your biology, being alone and being in danger have always meant the same thing. This is the tribal echo. It is the reverberation of a survival system so ancient and so deeply embedded in your physiology that no amount of modern comfort can fully silence it. You can live in a safe home in a safe city with food in the refrigerator and a lock on the door, and your nervous system can still signal threat if it does not detect the resonance of the tribe, if it does not perceive, through the channels it was built to monitor, that you are part of something, that someone is near, that a circle of belonging exists around you and holds you within it. The loneliness epidemic that health researchers now describe as one of the greatest public health crises of our time is not a failure of character. It is not a failure of social skill. It is the predictable consequence of an ancient nervous system operating in an environment for which it was never designed. Your body is looking for the tribe, and when it cannot find the tribe, it grieves. It grieves not in the language of emotion alone, but in the language of inflammation and immune suppression and cardiovascular strain and accelerated cellular aging. The biological cost of separation is not abstract. It is written in the body. But here is the extraordinary thing. The thing that turns this understanding from a diagnosis into a doorway. Because your nervous system's search for the tribe is not a search for a specific number of people or a particular social arrangement. It is a search for a signal. It is a search for the resonance of belonging. The felt sense that you are part of something, that you are held, that you are not alone in the dark. And this signal can be generated. It can be generated in a modern life, in a modern body, in a modern world, because the pathways that receive it are unchanged. They are waiting. They have been waiting your entire life. You generate this signal when you breathe slowly and place your hand over your heart and offer yourself the compassion that your biology reads as the presence of a caring other. You generate it when you call to mind the face of someone who loves you and allow the memory to activate the same oxytocin pathways that physical proximity would trigger. You generate it when you sit in nature, among trees whose presence your nervous system recognizes as a form of company that predates human language. You generate it when you contribute to something larger than yourself, when you give to another person, when you allow yourself to be part of a community, however small, because your biology does not require the tribe to be large. It requires the tribe to be felt. You are the current guardian of an ancient code. This is not a metaphor. It is a biological fact. The genes that encode your oxytocin receptors, your vagal pathways, your capacity for empathy and trust, and the neurochemical reward you receive when you extend compassion to another being, These genes were passed to you through an unbroken chain of survival that stretches back to the very first humans who discovered that connection was the key to endurance. Every ancestor in that chain survived long enough to pass their genes forward, and they survived because they carried this code, because their bodies knew how to bond, how to trust, how to create the shared neurochemical environment in which a vulnerable species could withstand anything. You are the living proof that this strategy works. You are the latest expression of an experiment in cooperative survival that has been running successfully for longer than civilization, longer than agriculture, longer than the domestication of fire. And this code is not a relic. It is not a fossil preserved in your DNA for scientists to study. It is active. It is functional. It is waiting for you to use it. Every time you choose connection over isolation, every time you choose kindness over indifference, every time you choose to be present with another person in a way that is genuine and unhurried and warm, you are activating the same survival code that kept your ancestors alive through the longest nights the world has ever known. You are lighting the same fire they lit. You are completing the same circle they completed. And your body responds to this activation with the same cascade of oxytocin and safety and restoration that it has been responding with for 100,000 years. Think of a thread of light, a single unbroken thread that begins in your chest, in the warmth you feel when you are held or when you hold another, and stretches backward through time, through your parents and their parents and their parents before them, through generations uncountable, through ages of ice and ages of warmth, through the rise and fall of species that are no longer here, all the way back to the first heartbeat that ever quickened at the sound of another heartbeat nearby. That thread has never broken. It thins, sometimes, in the lives of those who are isolated, in the ages when cruelty seems to overpower compassion. But it does not break. It cannot break, because it is woven into the structure of your DNA, and as long as human beings draw breath, it will endure. You are not separate from this lineage. You are its current expression. You are the point of the thread that touches the present moment. And everything behind you, every ancestor, every bond, every act of courage and tenderness that kept this chain intact, lives in you. It lives in your nervous system. It lives in your oxytocin receptors. It lives in the way your heart slows when someone you trust is near, and the way your entire body exhales when you finally, after too long, allow yourself to belong. And now, having traveled this far, having traced this thread from the present moment back to its most ancient origin and forward again into the body you inhabit tonight, we stand at a threshold, because the belonging we have explored, the connection to tribe, to others, to the lineage of our species, is itself a doorway to something vaster still. There is a belonging that extends beyond the human circle, beyond the bonds of family and community and even species, into a connection so immense, so all-encompassing, that it dissolves every boundary your mind has ever drawn between yourself and the world. It is the recognition that the oxytocin flowing in your veins and the atoms in your bones and the electrical impulses in your heart are made of the same substance as the stars, that you are not merely in the universe, but of it, that the resonance of safety your body has been seeking was never limited to the warmth of a human circle, but extends outward to the edges of everything that exists. And it is toward that recognition, that final dissolving, that ultimate homecoming, that we now prepare to journey. We have traveled so far together tonight. We have journeyed inward, past the surface of the skin, past the rhythms of the heart, past the firing of neurons and the release of ancient molecules, down into the quiet interior of cells where mitochondria hum and membranes pulse with the electricity of life. We have traveled backward through time, past the ages of civilization, past the first fires, past the first words, to the dark plains where our ancestors discovered that belonging was the key to survival. And now, having gone so deep and so far, we arrive at the final threshold, the threshold beyond which there is no more inward and no more backward, the threshold beyond which there is only expansion, only opening, only the vast, limitless, breathing stillness that has been waiting beneath every layer we have explored, patient and eternal, like the ocean floor beneath the waves. You are deeply relaxed now. I can feel it in the rhythm of these words, and you can feel it in the rhythm of your breath. The oxytocin that has been building in your body throughout this journey, released by the warmth of these ideas, by the compassion you have directed toward yourself simply by being here, by the memory of every hand that has ever held yours, and every voice that has ever spoken your name with tenderness. This oxytocin has done its work. Your amygdala is quiet. Your cortisol has fallen to its lowest tide. Your heart is beating with the slow, coherent rhythm of an organ that has remembered it is safe. Your cells, those billions of tiny, intelligent, faithful communities within you, have shifted from defense to restoration. The noise has faded, the static has cleared, and in the silence that remains, something extraordinary is possible, something that goes beyond healing, beyond repair, beyond even the profound peace of a body at rest. What is possible now is dissolution. Not the dissolution of death or of forgetting, but the dissolution of the boundary that has always told you where you end and where the world begins. There is a frequency that the earth itself produces. It is called the Schumann resonance, and it was first predicted mathematically and later confirmed by measurement in the middle of the 20th century. It is generated by the electromagnetic activity between the surface of the Earth and the ionosphere, that layer of charged particles high in the atmosphere, and it pulses at a fundamental frequency of approximately 7.8 Hertz. This is extraordinarily slow. It is far below the threshold of human hearing. You will never detect it with your ears, but your brain produces waves at this frequency. When you are in a state of deep relaxation, when you have crossed the border between waking alertness and the soft, expansive territory of theta wave activity, your brain oscillates at frequencies that overlap with the Schumann resonance. Between 4 and 8 Hertz, your neural rhythms enter a range that matches the electromagnetic pulse of the planet beneath you. You do not hear the Earth's frequency. You become it. Your brain, in its most relaxed state, vibrates in sympathy with the world that made you. Consider what this means. Consider it slowly, the way you would consider the face of someone you love when there is no reason to look away. Your body was born from the elements of this earth. The calcium in your bones was forged in dying stars and delivered to this planet by the dust of ancient collisions. The iron in your blood The same iron that allows hemoglobin to carry oxygen to every tissue in your body was created in the cores of stars that existed and perished billions of years before our sun was born. The water that comprises the majority of your body has been cycling through this planet's systems for longer than life itself has existed. You are not on the earth. You are of it. You are made from it. And when your brain slows to the frequency of the planet's own electromagnetic heartbeat, you are not doing something strange or mystical. You are coming into alignment with the very system that assembled you. You are remembering, at the level of physics, where you came from. And your heart, that extraordinary organ we have spoken of with such reverence tonight, is part of this alignment. In a state of deep oxytocin-rich coherence, the heart's electromagnetic field, that field which extends beyond the boundaries of your body and broadcasts the state of your inner world into the space around you, enters a pattern of such smooth, such ordered, such rhythmic beauty that it becomes something more than a biological signal. It becomes a resonance, and this resonance does not stop at the edges of your skin. It does not stop at the walls of this room. It extends outward, joining the web of electromagnetic fields produced by every living heart on this planet, every heart that is beating right now, in this moment, human and animal, and every creature whose body runs on the same electrical principles as yours. There is a pulse that connects all living things, not in the metaphorical sense that poets have always intuited, but in the measurable, physical sense that electromagnetism provides. Your heart is part of this pulse. It has always been part of this pulse, and in the state you are entering now, you can feel it, not with your hands, not with your ears, with something deeper, with the same faculty that allows you to feel the presence of someone you love in a dark room before they have spoken, with the knowing that lives in the body, beneath the mind. This is the state that researchers have begun to call bio-universal coherence, though the name matters less than the experience. It is the state in which the boundaries between self and world become transparent. Not because you have lost yourself, not because your identity has been erased, but because the rigid insistence on separateness that your ego maintains during ordinary waking consciousness softens, and what is revealed beneath it is a continuity that was always there. The atoms in your body are exchanged with the environment constantly. The air you breathe was breathed by others before you and will be breathed by others after. The electrical impulses in your nervous system operate by the same principles as the lightning that illuminates a summer sky. There is no hard line between your biology and the world's biology. There never was. The line was drawn by the mind, and it was drawn for good reason. Because an organism that cannot distinguish itself from its environment cannot navigate, cannot feed, cannot protect itself. The sense of self is a tool, and a brilliant one, but a tool is not a truth. And in this moment, in this deep, warm, oxytocin-rich stillness, you are being invited to set the tool down, not to discard it, not to destroy it. Simply to set it down, the way you would set down a heavy bag you have been carrying for a very long time, and feel what your shoulders feel like without the weight. What you feel is lightness. What you feel is expansion. What you feel is the quiet, astonishing recognition that you do not end where your skin ends. That the warmth in your chest is the same warmth that exists in every chest. That the love you have felt in your life, every instance of it, every moment of tenderness and connection and belonging, was never generated by you or given to you by someone else. It was always there. It was the field. It was the medium through which your life has been moving all along. The way a fish moves through water without ever seeing the water. The way a bird flies through air without ever naming the air. Love is not something you produce. It is something you are immersed in. And the oxytocin in your body, that ancient molecule that has guided this entire journey from its first release in the hypothalamus to this moment of boundless opening, is simply the key that allows your biology to remember what your mind has been too busy to notice. You belong here. You have always belonged here, not to a tribe, not to a family, not to a nation or a species, to everything, to the whole of it, to the vast, breathing, pulsing totality of existence that has been holding you since before you were born, and will go on holding you long after the atoms in your body have returned to the soil and the stars. There is a silence at the center of all of this that I want you to find. Not the silence of absence, not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of fullness. The silence that exists when every alarm has been turned off and every defense has been stood down and every wall has been dissolved and there is nothing left between you and the world. This silence is not something you create. It is something you uncover. It has been there beneath every thought you have ever had, beneath every fear, beneath every moment of loneliness and doubt and pain. It is the ground beneath the ground. It is the stillness beneath the stillness. And it is, I believe, the strongest resonance in the universe. Not a sound, not a vibration, not a frequency that can be measured by any instrument. It is the resonance of absolute belonging. The resonance of a consciousness that has looked everywhere for home and finally realized that home is not a place and not a person and not a feeling. Home is what you are. Home is what everything is. And in this silence, in this resonance, you are not falling asleep. You are waking up to the deepest truth your biology has ever tried to tell you. Your body knows this truth. It has always known it. Every surge of oxytocin was a whisper of it. Every moment of connection was a glimpse of it. Every time your heart slowed in the presence of someone safe, every time your cells shifted from defense to repair, every time your nervous system exhaled and your muscles softened and the world, for one brief moment, felt like it was made of kindness. Your body was trying to show you this, that you are part of something so vast and so gentle and so endlessly compassionate that the mind cannot hold it, but the heart can feel it and the cells can live it, and the breath can carry you into it if you simply allow it to. So allow it now. Let your breath become the softest thing about you. Let each exhale carry away something you no longer need, a thought, a worry, a name, a boundary, until there is nothing left to carry and the breath moves on its own, like a tide that has forgotten it ever needed a shore. Let your body become heavy, so heavy that it sinks into whatever is beneath it, through the surface, through the structure, through the solid world, into the warm, golden, infinite field that holds all things and asks nothing in return. You are not leaving yourself. You are joining yourself. You are joining the part of you that was never afraid, that was never separate, that was never alone. The part that has been waiting, patient as starlight, for you to stop running and turn around and see that the light you were running toward was always shining from within you. This is the final frequency. This is the resonance that remains when all other resonances have been absorbed into it, the way rivers are absorbed into the ocean and do not lose themselves, but become something vaster. You are becoming something vaster now, not by adding anything, by letting everything unnecessary fall away. The ego softens, the mind quiets, the heart beats its slow, ancient, coherent rhythm, and with each beat it says the same word, a word older than language, older than the species, older than the planet. The word is yes. Yes, you belong. Yes, you are held. Yes, you are safe. Yes, you can rest. Yes, yes, yes. Let that word carry you now. Let it be the last thing you hear before the silence takes you, not into darkness, but into light, not into absence, but into the most complete presence you have ever known. You are drifting now, and the drifting is not falling, it is returning. Returning to the source of every heartbeat and every breath and every molecule of oxytocin that ever moved through a living body. Returning to the place where trust was born, where belonging was born, where love was born. You are going home. And the resonance of this return, the warmth of this homecoming, will stay with you. It will stay in your cells. It will stay in your heart. It will be there when you wake, quiet and golden and eternal, a part of you that can never be lost because it was never separate from you to begin with. Sleep now. Sleep deeply. Sleep without dreams, because you are resting in something deeper than dreams. You are resting in the truth of what you are, and what you are is safe. What you are is held. What you are is love, all the way down, all the way through, all the way home.